Hi, my name is Buledi.
Hi, my name is Khanyisile.
Hi, I'm Wikuzo.
Hi, my name is Khanyisile, and we are
Riverside Mental Health Associates.
This is our podcast, The Mental Route.
Journey with us as we take psychology beyond the room.
Yeah.
Like romance. Hi everyone, my name is Khanyisile Bujela. Welcome to another episode of The Mental Route with Riverside Mental Health Associates. I'm here with Wikuzo and Buledi, my colleagues, and we'll be discussing dating as a single parent. Ooh. So one of the things that I wanted to first speak to is, are there any differences, in general dating as opposed to dating as a single parent or just dating as a human? What are you guys' thoughts? Are there any differences?
Yeah, I think there's some differences in that. I mean, at the end of the day, dating is dating, right? It's a little bit awkward. It's a little bit testing the waters, hoping they like you as much as you like them. But I think maybe part of the difference with being a parent is thinking about not only how much you like them, but how much you like them as a potential permanent person in your child's life. Is this someone that even likes kids, right? To begin with, are you falling for someone who actually doesn't want kids, isn't interested in kids, or they do, but they have very different ideas about how to parent a kid and so on. So it does get a bit more complicated in terms of you're now not only thinking for yourself, you're thinking for the potential relationship of the person you're dating and your child and the family that they might be walking into.
But it's also very important to highlight that when you're dating as a single parent, you're also not looking for a step parent for your child. Sometimes you're dating just for purely just dating, but I think it's much more of making sure that person that comes into your life doesn't, take up too much space, as opposed to, sharing them and your child and balancing those two things. It is very important to hold in mind that that person doesn't take up too much space, because when you're dating as a human, you have your space to yourself. You come and go as you like. Now you have to think of this person who's your dependent. You have to think, where do I spend my Saturday night?
Exactly.
Is my child secure wherever they are? And are they well taken care of? It's those kind of things, rather than the person being in your life physically and sharing space with your child. It's much more of how do you manage the time and moving around. Not step.
Right. So maybe number one to think about is, are you dating for fun? Right? Or are you ready for something serious? Because then you are, inevitably, if you're just dating for fun, great. Maybe that's something you keep to yourself and just think about how it affects your time management with your kids. But if you are looking for a long-term partner, inevitably that partner is a step. There's no avoiding that. True. So that's something to kind of keep in mind.
Yeah. I was about to add that I also think when you're just a single person and maybe you're not a parent, as Kanye said, there are limitations of spaces of which you go with that particular person. But an intimate space like home becomes a little bit tricky if you're not ready for your child to be introduced to your partner. But also, I do think that it also limits the number of times you date or meet people, because some people would be like, no, a child can see multiple people in your life. So I do think that it becomes a limitation if you are exploring dating for fun or for commitment. There's a limitation of, it's not a moral thing that I'm bringing up, but it's a thing in our families. As to, you can't expose your kid to many potential partners. As to what meaning does that hold, and some would be like, what are you modeling? But I'm not bringing it up from a moral perspective, but more what tends to be the discourse that comes about when you're a parent but dating.
Yeah.
So how much of your dating life do you share with your kid? I guess is like what we're talking about. Well, how much of your dating life do you share with your kid?
I think it's an age approach. It differs according to age. You know, some people say that the younger the child is, it's easier, but I don't think so. I think sometimes they also create a lot of attachment. So it's also those things that you have to hold in mind. You know, am I bringing this person in, and then this child bonds with them, and they think, oh, this is a cool uncle or cool aunt, and then now that person is gone. You know, or now the teenager has developed some closeness to this person, and then do you discuss the breakup with them? You know, do you let them know that I'm no longer with so and so now? So it's all of those things. That's why it's so important to be mindful of how much you expose the children to, because now you're constantly having to have conversations with them. That you know.
What's been your experience with some of these conversations? And obviously, I mean, you're a parent amongst us here, and it's like, obviously, those conversations can be awkward, and thinking about how do you deliver some of the information that is helpful for them to know while still maintaining a kind of boundary that this is, you know, whatever that boundary is. What is that boundary? Like, this isn't your future father. Like,
We're just friends.
Just friends.
For how long?
You know, and maybe you have some wisdoms or two on
No wisdom.
or just like the guidance of a practitioner, say, talking to a client of like, how do you manage that kind of conversation, and where's the line between giving just enough information that your child can have age-appropriate understanding, that you're also a human being who wants connections and isn't only a parent, right? Versus what's oversharing, right? If you have a bad breakup, how much of the breakup do you share, or you know, and how much emotionality can you bring to be authentic in those conversations without making your emotions your child's responsible, you know, not making your child care for you during the breakup,
I think obviously that is a very important thing, not to involve your child in terms of the emotional dependency. You know, you have your friends, you have your girlfriends, but just to start off with the first part of your question, how much do you expose the child in terms of the knowledge? I think obviously dating pool, not so great, so you have to be mindful of that. You know, is this someone that you have established some form of foundation with, something solid? I think it's always important. Well, you never know, sometimes you feel like it's solid and then it turns out to be something else, but I think try and first get through the talking stage. Don't get too excited, and then you know, and once there's something established, then I think it's okay to be like, and I think for this one I would cut from the, you know, the book from the old people, where it's like a friend, you know, you introduce it from a friend,
slowly but surely.
you know, bring it in, oh, it's just a friend, and then have a conversation at a later stage once you sort of have started integrating him into your life and the child's life, that okay, this is mommy's boyfriend or mommy's partner, and because I mean, constant conversation with your children is important, and they always pick it up. They'll know that that's not just a friend. So also respect their intelligence. So have a conversation when you feel like you are ready to do so. Not just when things are looking good, you know. So I think that.
So even that, sometimes it works, you know, and sometimes children are quite embracing of their partner or the friend that you bring in or they're exposed to, and sometimes unfortunately children act out, be it they start being aggressive or microaggressions and all of that, and I'm wondering what would be most, at least a viable suggestion for parents who do not know how to mitigate the acting out, be it aggression or being withdrawn as well, besides aggression. They can kind of show certain behavioral patterns that are unusual since you've introduced someone.
I think have a conversation with the child about that. That I see that you don't like, or you're not comfortable with so and so, and have an honest conversation and acknowledge that for them. And I think your children should always come first. I think, in as much as your happiness, love is important, but I think your children should come first at all times. Not to say that your happiness is not a priority, but I think it is very important to think about how you can work around that, because you can't force a child to like your partner. If they don't, they don't. Find out why, and maybe it's something that's rooted in maybe the feelings around their parent, their biological parent. Maybe it's something that's not really that has nothing to do with your partner, and maybe it's something that you need to address and work through, and then that relationship would be nurtured. So I think have a conversation. Have a conversation.
I think that's so important, right? Because for me, that's always about a balance between remembering that children can have human reactions, right? In this kind of situation, we've seen maybe too many examples of parents who feel like the child's acting out as a way of saying you don't deserve happiness, right? You don't deserve to have a loving partner or whatever. And there can be a lot of dismissal of the child's feelings in that situation, which kind of brings back to the point of like, your child comes first in a lot of ways, but that shouldn't be something that competes with your sense of happiness. But also sometimes, and maybe this is kind of a bit of a uncomfortable turn to take, is excuse me, trusting your child's instincts. Sometimes and you only gain that from conversations with them about what is it that you don't like, and I think the easiest one is like, I don't want this person to replace my biological parent. That's probably the easiest for me conversation you'll have. But when it starts getting to, sometimes you get partners that seem cool with you but act funny when you turn your back.
True,
right?
True.
And you never see that because they don't show that to you. And being able to allow your child to communicate that this person isn't exactly how they always show, or this is what happens when you're not around, and not taking that to be like, you just don't want me to have a new partner, or you think I'm replacing your father or whoever. It's like, talk to the child, hear what's going on, because they may have a perspective that you don't. But also, if it is just acting out because of like you're not wanting to replace a parent, holding a little bit of space for that, and not shutting it down like you must smile anytime this person comes around, like holding space for your child to be able to express that that discomfort, that dis-ease of like I really don't want to be too quick to accept this person. And being an advocate for your child in that, being like, okay, they're still getting comfortable, so if they are a little bit rude here or there, it's not necessarily a cause for punishment, as it is maybe a cause for a teaching moment, or a moment to connect, or an opportunity for the both of them to maybe, like, I don't know, go on a lunch together, get to know each other, that kind of thing, holding space for them to be able to get to know each other the same way you created space to slowly get to know your partner.
Creating boundaries. I think also what's important is to create boundaries to protect your child. If they're not feeling safe with this person, hear them out. And not necessarily safe in terms of safety, security, but maybe emotional security. Maybe they feel like this person is looking at them weirdly, and they voice that out. It's important that you take that into consideration and not be defensive.
Absolutely.
Relationships take up a lot of time. So you end up spending a lot of time with this person, you no longer present in the home, homework, you know, coming back late, weekends away, and then so it's very important to, you know, make sure that you balance it out in a healthy way.
Don't get too drunk on the honeymoon phase.
Stay sober-minded.
Keep grounded, and remember that you still have a whole life actually that existed before that person, and you're trying to integrate them into your life, not just surrender your whole life for this person, especially when it's still new. I want to bring up the fact, so for me, introductions set the tone for a lot of things, right? And I know that in Black families that doesn't always go so well, right? For all of the reasons that we're talking about, right? Sometimes and you guys who are listening can maybe comment in the comments or whatever. But I had mentioned earlier before we started recording that, you know, in some families, it'll be like, oh, this is Uncle Mang Mang, who you didn't even know you had this uncle, but they start appearing, you know, and then 1, 2, 3, uncle is here every day. Next thing, uncle's your stepfather. Okay, what did you know, those kinds of introductions. And, you know, it starts off as uncle because that's the kind of terms of respect that we use for even neighbors, right? We still use those kinds of familial terms of respect. We're not blood related, but ki abuti mang mang or ki malume mang mang, or you know, and how that can clash with some of the more, I want to say, westernized traditions we have around dating, talking stages, and all of that, and being mindful to how that introduction happens, how to hold space for that kind of introduction, and like we're saying, hold space for the child, because in Black families you don't really get a say. Like, this person shows up and you have to deal now, because anything you say beyond that is like disrespect or selfish, or so I guess my question is, like, how do we balance some of our cultural respectabilities with the very modernized ways we come to dating, soft life, all of that.
I think I would definitely have a formal conversation.
Yeah.
Formal introductions. This is so and so. My partner or my boyfriend. I think just having that from the get-go is important. It doesn't have to be in the home. Maybe we could go to a restaurant or meet up with that person. But I think I would also brief the child before that you're gonna meet someone, mom's special friend.
Special friend.
Not just special friend, a new friend, not one of the ones you know already, you know. And you know,
be yourself, tell me how you feel, you know,
I support what Kanye is saying, but I can admit that it's a tension internally because of cultural ways of doing things and thinking about introducing your child. So, but at the same time, why I'm supporting Kanye is because then confusion builds with time for the kid as to, you know, why sometimes you can't. There'll be affection, for example, between you and uncle, or you'll find yourself holding hands. You know, there'll be that locking of eyes that seems amazing and romantic, and the child is like super confused, you know, as to what's happening. And with that confusion, sometimes even the acting out can start like that, because you're not, you know, quite transparent with the child. And so forth. So I would definitely to just avoid the confusion part, gently though, but make it clear and real to the child. And obviously, because it might feel quite forward, you also want to reassure the child that they can ask any questions that they are wondering about, since you've introduced mommy's special friend.
And I think it's also modeling. Modeling, because especially with like teens or adolescents, you also want that to be done, by them. To introduce feel comfortable to introduce their partners, when they start dating.
I think that's important, right? In a lot of Black families, or even just any families of color, there's this still kind of, I don't know how strong it still is. Maybe we're on the other side of it, but I know that there's still a very strong tradition of you don't introduce someone unless you're going to marry them. Unless you're coming with marriage stories. You want to know who this person is.
Or you're pregnant, now you have to deliver that.
And now you have to do damages and whatnot. So thinking about how actually in a lot of ways that keeps us from knowing our family members really well, and having them be our second, third, fourth pair of eyes to this partner. Parents, I'm 100% sure that however this came up as a tradition amongst Black people, it was purely out of the discomfort of dealing with the kind of awkwardness and awkward tensions that come with dating and introducing this person who could potentially be a member of the family but isn't yet, right? Is still in the friendship circle, developing, that kind of thing. But understanding that, especially as a parent who's starting to date, that that can create a lot of harm to just have a child wake up and be like, this is your new stepfather or stepmother or whatever, and your job is to be seen and not heard, right? And that's also quite still something that I think we struggle with in Black families, of like, as a child you'll get dismissed because these are adult things, these are adult problems, or adult business. So thinking about the ways in which maybe culturally that used to be a way of doing things, right? But understanding how even some of our own cultural traditions hurt us, hurt our relationships, and make it tough for us to be open about some of the awkward parts of life that could potentially still get us to the good things that we want.
I think another thing, as a single parent or dating as a parent, that we need to hold in mind is to not settle. Sometimes we settle because you find the dating pool, I keep saying, not so great. And then when you meet someone, you feel like, oh yay, great. And then so you hold on to that. And then sometimes you see red flags and you feel like, there's this discourse that you, as single parents, you are damaged, or you're less than, or so there's
you
also
have to take what you can get.
There aren't better opportunities.
So there's also that you also don't have to settle. You're still the prize. You're still amazing. So also hold that in mind, because sometimes people settle for very bare minimum kind of stuff, all in the name of just having someone. Because I can imagine there's lonely, but you don't have to settle.
And I think keeping that dating criteria in mind, right? Like you were saying earlier, you're not just dating for a step parent, right? You're not just looking for a potential dad. You're looking for a partner, someone who can make you feel special, and hold you up still as someone who deserves all of the dating niceties. And not just like, you already have a kid. Well, you know all about it. Like, you know how some people can be. I think that's a critical one, honestly, because it's so easy to, and I think you find this a lot with maybe any parent, but I know that mothers in particular who are like teenage parents always have that kind of self-esteem about, I need to prove myself, or maybe I'm not good enough, or still carrying that kind of trauma of being told that they're bad for having a child at an age that was not regulated by society, I guess, and remembering that these aren't things that should hold you back from holding out for the partner that you know you deserve.
Yeah.
I also have a question from my end, and it's sometimes when single parents are dating, there's this criteria around I would prefer someone who has kids. So I'm wondering about the significance of that. Should we be open-minded in that it doesn't matter really, or does it make a significant difference if you are dating someone who has kids because you feel they will relate to your, for example, we spoke about balancing the relationship and honeymoon phase, especially with your with not and also not neglecting the child. And some would argue that it's only a partner who has kids who will understand that balance that you're grappling with. So I'm wondering, what's the significance? Is it significant, or is it just just individually based, that it depends on an individual? I don't know.
I think it does depend on individuals. It's a personal thing, but I think in conversations with people, there is that thing of you understand certain problems better. You'll be able to resonate with certain struggles or certain experiences because you also are a parent. But knowing South African, a lot of them aren't active. That's also the other problem. It's also making sure that the person you're with, are they an active parent? What does that mean for you? If they're an absent parent, is that a deal breaker? Those kind of things, because now he's playing house here. Not
with these own.
So it's also those kind of things that you also hold in mind when you sussing out.
As a parent.
I think it's always about, is the person, did they have their own intentions to have kids, if this is someone who doesn't have kids that you're potentially dating, and what's their understanding of being a parent, potentially, or even just coming around kids in this dating capacity. But also you could find someone who does have kids, but they're a deadbeat, and so that doesn't make them any better an option. I think maybe we're getting close to wrapping up, and maybe an appropriate kind of thing to think about as we're doing that is, how do we handle a breakup conversation, right? If things don't go well, and things were going well for a good enough time that you were able to introduce and start to build relationship between your partner and your kid, and then the breakup, and now having to explain, like, this person's not coming around anymore. Do you want them to maintain? Does the partner and the kid have a strong enough relationship that you might feel comfortable or awkward for them to continue a relationship, even though you guys aren't romantically connected anymore? So it gets tricky.
But that was a conversation on Twitter once, where someone was talking about their partner's child, ex-partner at the time. They were graduating from preschool, I think, something like that. And then they were like, they expect an invitation because they've established a relationship with this child.
Made promises.
So I think it's also balancing that, like you would ordinarily a relationship with the biological parent, understanding that you have to ease the child out of that, because and separate partner and your relationship with the child. Difficult, because now what if you were hurt, now you're carrying that injury, and he has to come to your child's thing. You don't deserve nice things. But you also really need to hold space, like we were talking earlier, for the child and their emotions. If you don't want the person around, then let the child know that this has ended, and but if the child still has a good relationship with the person, let them still maintain some form of relationship, but knowing that there has to come a point where there will be a stop.
Tricky. Very.
But why people do
tricky.
it so easy? And they maintain relationships
Yeah.
with some will be even raised by their
Really?
partner, parents' exes. They're like, he's my mom's ex-husband. And it's like, I don't know how they do it.
Yeah. I think for us it's also about, I don't know, when I look at like even broken families amongst like the Black community, we really carry that hurt. Hey, we really hold on to that hurt in a big way, and we're quite sensitive to that hurt. So as soon as that, of course, because it's landing on top of other intergenerational pains and whatnot, but we kind of take it that as soon as you're feeling any kind of discomfort or hurt from a relationship, you cut and run. I don't want to hear stories.
Leave me alone.
Like, I don't want to hear. And that's how we end up in situations where we have a lot of children being raised never meeting their fathers, because not because maybe the father didn't want to be involved, but they were actively pushed out of the relationship and so on. So that kind of thing, I imagine, also replicates itself with dating, where it's tough to kind of hold space for the hurt you've experienced, while still being able to acknowledge different parts of that relationship, and the fact that your child would have made a connection that they have their own process of getting out of that connection that may not look like yours. Maybe slightly easier when the child is younger and isn't so fully aware of everything, and they just know that this person doesn't come around anymore, and mommy said they're not friends anymore, or
I mean, we move.
But obviously when they're old and can think and see for themselves and even build a certain connection with that person, it becomes much more tricky for you as a parent to not overly interfere in that relationship if you see that it has a good impact on your child. But tricky, right? I mean, very, very, very tricky. I think maybe also an important thing to say then is, like, since we're talking about the hurt of breakups, is don't over divulge. That for me is like, of course, breakups happen for a lot of reasons and whatever. So sometimes it can be very like, wow, hectic. This is a intense breakup because of infidelity or whatever else, and even if the child is, well, maybe it depends on their age, but thinking about not coming to your child and be like, that raggedy ass, I don't want to talk to that, and being mindful of not bringing that venom, I want to say, to the child, in a way of trying to encourage them to start to think badly about this person, so that they can be encouraged to also end communication for your own comfort, as opposed to just being mindful about the whole situation. But I know that's like a big thing of like, hey, I don't want to hear about that one.
Still speak to him for what?
For what?
And in this, have you guys watched Ginny and Georgia?
Yes.
I want to.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot about that. Obviously there's a lot to that series, but it also just highlights how it's so important to be mindful of how you behave as a parent and the impact it has on your child. The lasting effects that it has, on their mental health. So I know it's a big thing to hold in mind, because it's a lot of responsibility, but it does come with the territory. Being able to, like, okay, I need to do better. I need to be a good version of myself. Even in this area, the dating. So making sure that you're not oversharing. Make use of your friends. Your girlfriends. Have the, all the dark stuff with them. Tell them how terrible it is. but don't bring that into the home because you're also injuring the child. You also, it has effects on them.
Yeah.
And if you don't have those connections, if you can afford therapy,
Yeah.
have some
So
therapy.
it's also a good space.
Yeah, make use of some journaling, a private Twitter account, whatever to get it out, but don't bring it to the child, you know?
Yeah.
Okay.
All
sign us off.
right. Thank you for listening. Do comment below. We look forward to hearing from you guys and
Absolutely.
your thoughts, any perspectives, your experiences even. How do you handle it? Because one thing about life is that we learn through experience. So whatever we may speak of, sometimes it may not even be how it is for you. So maybe help us with some tips on how you've maintained a healthy relationship and also a healthy relationship with your child while dating. Thank you so much, Boledi and Boykutso, for your input today. And thank you guys. Thank you for listening. And this is Khanyisile Bujela from The Mental Root.